And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, from the National Weather Service, this is meteorologist Joel Curtis with your aviation weather forecast issued Monday, October 6th. So for flying weather Tuesday morning, we've got a heck of a system coming on up into the Gulf of Anadyr, and then it reforms over the Chukchi Sea. So as you'll see over the next couple of days, there's some pretty bad flying conditions going to occur from this one. So first, starting out for Tuesday morning, extensive IFR in the occluded front that goes up to about St. Matthew Island, and then a warm front extends over into southwestern Alaska, and there's IFR conditions associated with that. Marginal VFR over most of the Bering Sea and almost all of the mainland. A little bit of the south central and Prince William Sound open to VFR. Then we have the IFR along the north slope and down into the Brooks Range, and also a little bit of IFR conditions over the higher terrain in southeast Alaska, otherwise most of the southeast being marginal VFR. By Tuesday afternoon, a lot of that IFR has faded out, but there's still along the front from about the Pribilofs on down to the central Aleutians, some IFR, as well as some IFR over the western Brooks Range, almost to Kotzebue Sound, and then just offshore the North Slope. Otherwise, most of the state, again, marginal VFR and a little bit of marginal VFR in the Panhandle. So then, for Wednesday morning, some IFR all along the Brooks Range, as well as still along that slow-moving front in southwestern Alaska, extending down into the eastern Aleutians. Also some IFR offshore, except for Utiagavik, which has got some IFR conditions. Lots of marginal VFR, again, across the state, and then out into the Gulf, and some marginal VFR leftovers in southeast Alaska. Then for Wednesday afternoon, extensive IFR from about Cape Romanzoff up through Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, Chukchi Sea, and all along the North Slope. Otherwise, marginal VFR again all across the state with a frontal system that's weakening and dying out, but still causing enough weather for some marginal VFR conditions. And then extensive marginal VFR in the Gulf of Alaska and extending inland up by Yakutat. So let's take a look at our pass conditions. For Anatuvik Pass, IFR with turbulence. Adigan Pass, IFR with turbulence. For Tuesday, turbulence in the afternoon for Lake Clark and Merrill, also IFR becoming marginal VFR. Turbulence expected for Rainy Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR. For Windy Pass, marginal VFR with turbulence. Isabel Pass, a marginal VFR. Mentasta Pass, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Tahiti Pass, that'll be marginal VFR becoming VFR. Portage Pass, marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR in the morning becoming marginal VFR in the afternoon. So for our freezing levels, surface freezing level is risen above the surface up in the Chukchi Sea also, but down at the surface for the Brooks Range in the morning. And then an area that covering much of the northern part of South Central and then on over into the northern Southeast Alaska and into northwestern Canada in the morning. And so then that keeps the aloft freezing levels 2,000 feet down to the Brooks Range, 2,000 feet in northwestern Canada, extending a little bit over the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains and northern southeast. And then, as you can see, the warm air tongue, if you will, coming up with that frontal system, then it ramps all the way up to 12,000 feet as you get south of Dutch Harbor and Coal Bay. So where does that sit for icing? Freezing level to 14,000 feet right along the Alcan, and then several areas of considerable moderate freezing level to 180, And those would be all along the west coast into the western interior, also Norton Sound, and then down across the Bering Sea into southwestern Alaska, and then with the frontal system on down into the Aleutians. So for our jet stream on Tuesday, this is a real good, strong jet stream for fall. And the weather systems will steer along with this jet stream, so that's why we have that developing low going up into the Gulf of Anadyr and eventually ending up into the Chukchi Sea, 165 knot southwesterlies at 30,000 feet. That doesn't mean a whole lot to the general aviation that'll be well below that, but the point is that's where our steering mechanism is, and then you can tell from the shape of this jet stream that it is an upper level ridge that is supporting this. So then we have at 9,000 feet the contrast between the low pressure center that's in the Gulf of Anadyr and a high that's well south of the Gulf of Alaska. And then we're ramping up to about 100 knots at 9,000 feet, down to 70 as you get further north, and then some northwesterlies as you get across the Gulf. And then for our 3,000-foot winds, all the way up to 85 knots as you're crossing the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians, and the southern Alaska Peninsula, all around that low that's in the Gulf of Anadyr, and it drops off to about 50 knots as you get up toward Kotzebue Sound. But it's generally southerlies, southwesterlies, and then a little bit of northwesterlies as you go further into the Gulf of Alaska, and then also just a little bit over the southern part of the Brooks Range, a little bit of westerlies up to about 30 knots or so. So this sets up our turbulence. Most of the mainland of Alaska is going to have considerable moderate turbulence right on up through the Brooks Range all the way up from Bristol Bay, and that'll be surface to about 6,000 feet, and also plenty of areas of low-level wind shear expected with this system. And then as you get down to the Aleutians, it's going to be more drop off to about surface to 4,000 feet, but we have one area of isolated severe from about Coal Bay out through Dutch Harbor. So there's plenty of turbulence out there, and please beware of that when you're flight planning. So that's it for your aviation forecast. Be sure to fly a flight plan. Please be safe out there with this really strong weather system that's coming in.